Graham Gouldman is best known as a founding member of 70s rock band 10cc. He's been the band's only constant member since 1972. However, he got his start in music in the early to mid-60s. At the time, he was the leader of a band called the Mockingbirds. Oddly enough, none of the singles he released with the Mockingbirds managed to chart. But on the other hand, several of the songs that he wrote for other artists became big hits. Here's a selection of songs that he wrote for other artists in the 60s. Graham Gouldman's first hit was For Your Love by the Yardbirds. This is the song that famously prompted Eric Clapton to leave the group. Clapton thought the song was too pop and he felt that the band was betraying its blues roots. The song was released by Columbia on the 5th of March 1965, and it became a massive hit. The single reached number 1 in the UK and number 6 in the States. It was also a top 10 hit in several European countries.
She's been gone such a long time, longer than I can bear.
Heart Full of Soul was another excellent song that Graham Gouldman wrote for the Yardbirds. This was the first Yardbirds single to feature Jeff Beck on guitar. Heart Full of Soul, along with See My Friend by the Kinks, is considered to be the first British pop song to feature Indian influences. Both songs were released several months before Norwegian Wood by the Beatles. The riff of the song was inspired by Indian music, and the Yardbirds manager even hired a sitar and tabla player for a recording session. However, the band felt that the sitar wasn't upfront enough and it didn't cut through the mix. So Jeff Beck decided to imitate the sound of a sitar with his guitar and a fuzz pedal. The single reached number 2 in the UK and number 9 in the States.
Evil-hearted you always try to put me down.
Gouldman wrote yet another song for the Yardbirds, Evil-Hearted You. This was another excellent song with a melody that almost sounded like the theme tune of one of those so-called spaghetti western movies that were popular at the time. The song also featured a magnificent slide solo by the late great Jeff Beck. Evil-Hearted You wasn't released as a single in the States, so it didn't chart there. In the UK, however, the song reached number 3. The success of those singles by the Yardbirds prompted several bands and artists to record Graham Gouldman compositions. In 1965, Gouldman wrote songs for artists such as Dave Berry,
I'm gonna take you there.
The Shindigs,
Why can't I see that I was wrong?
and American singer Tony Basil.
I'm 28, it's getting late, what have I got to do?
The lyrics of this track were quite unusual. The song dealt with the topic of society's expectations regarding women. It's a song about a woman who turns 28 and feels she's already too old to get married and form a family.
My time is gone, my fears are growing, my chances now are few.
The song was released as the B-side of Tony Basil's single Breakaway. That same year, the song was also recorded by Friday Brown, although released under a different title.
But I don't want to finish up alone in a rocking chair.
None of these tracks managed to become hits, but 1965 saw Gouldman writing yet another big hit for another band. Look Through Any Window by the Hollies was a song written by Graham Gouldman and Charles Silverman. The single managed to reach number 4 in the UK, and it was also the Hollies' first American Billboard Top 40 hit, peaking at number 32 in early 1966. The song featured those great signature harmonies by the Hollies, and a great 12-string guitar riff which was reminiscent of the Byrds. Bobby Elliott's explosive drumming is also one of the highlights of the song, further proof that Elliott was one of the best drummers from the early days of the British invasion. Graham Gouldman wrote another hit for the Hollies a year later, in 1966. Bus Stop is still a big favorite among fans of the Hollies. Just like Heart Full of Soul by the Yardbirds, the song also featured Indian influences during the guitar solo. At the time, apart from being a member of the Mockingbirds and writing songs for other artists, Gouldman was also working in a men's outfitters. In later decades, he explained that he wrote the song while riding to work on the bus. The single reached number 5 in the UK. In the States, it also reached number 5 on the Billboard charts. Another big hit that Graham Gouldman wrote in 1966 was No Milk Today by Herman's Hermits. The song peaked at number 7 in the UK, and it was also a major hit in many European countries. In the States, the song wasn't released as a single. Dandy, written by Ray Davies, was released in its place with the same B-side. But No Milk Today reached number 35 a year later in the States when it was released as the B-side to There's a Kind of Hush, which reached number 4. The song Listen People, also penned by Graham, reached number 3 in the States, and it was also a top 10 hit in Australia and Scandinavia.
Everybody's got to lose somebody sometime, so take care that you don't lose your heart.
Gouldman wrote several other songs for Herman's Hermits in the 60s, but none of them achieved the same kind of success as those two singles. 1966 also saw Graham Gouldman writing songs for artists such as Wayne Fontana, who reached number 11 in the UK with a song called Pamela Pamela.
Pamela, Pamela, you started to grow. Answers to questions you wanted to know.
Gouldman also wrote The Cost of Leaving by the Downliners sect.
Wheel is always spinning, but someone else has winning.
People Passing By High Society.
People passing by, they make me wonder why.
And an excellent song called Behind the Door, recorded by the St. Louis Union.
Behind the door of every house, in every street, in every town.
Cher also issued a cover of this number a year later, in 1967.
Behind the door of every house, in every street, in every town.
In 1967, Gouldman penned Tallyman by Jeff Beck.
He's the Tallyman. Oh yeah, he's the Tallyman.
This was one of several solo singles that Beck released in 1967 when he was still managed and produced by Mickey Most. The song stalled at number 30 in the UK. That same year, he also wrote The Impossible Years for Wayne Fontana.
These are the impossible years a girl must endure.
Naughty Nippon Nights by The Shadows. And Going Home by Normie Rowe, which became a hit in Australia.
I can't wait for the day when I'll be on my way going home.
But perhaps one of the best songs that he wrote for another artist in 1967 was Schoolgirl by the Mindbenders.
She was a schoolgirl with 7 GCEs, but one ambition was to collect degrees. But in a library, researching English lit, she met a student who took her mind off it.
At that point, Gouldman's own band, the Mockingbirds, had already disbanded after a series of singles that failed to chart. However, their song You Stole My Love became a minor hit in Spain when it was covered in Spanish by a band from Barcelona called Los Dracs.
Sé que hoy decidiste al fin ya de mi amor olvidarte.
Gouldman joined the Mindbenders in 1968 just before the band broke up, and gifted the band with a great psychedelic pop ditty called Uncle Joe the Ice Cream Man.
Cherry, lemon, tangerine, he served ice cream as though it were ambrosia.
Eric Stewart, Gouldman's future companion in 10cc, had been a member of the Mindbenders since 1963. And it was during this period that Gouldman and Stewart started working together. In 1969, Graham Gouldman was hired by Jerry Kassenetz and Jeffrey Katz of Super K Productions to write songs for other artists, and he spent the early 70s writing plenty of songs for bands such as the Ohio Express,
Everything's grooving like in a movie. Sausalito is the place to go to.
Garden Odyssey Enterprise,
I didn't know I hurt you so. Till I heard you got to go.
and Gene Pitney, among many others. In In 1972, Graham Gouldman formed 10cc. And as they say, the rest is history.